What if everything you have been told about the war inside Pink Floyd is built on a lie of convenience? The lie that there was a villain and a victim, a genius and an obstacle. We are handed two camps and asked to choose. Either the bassist was a tyrant who strangled a democracy of equals, or the guitarist was a journeyman who inherited a name he did not build and coasted on it. Both stories are satisfying. Both let you take a side, and both are false, because the truth is harder and sadder than a villain. The truth is that two men were right at the same time about incompatible things, and the band could only live in the space between their two correct ideas. To understand the war, you have to understand what the band had been before it. In the early years, the period of restless searching, they were a laboratory with no single director. They drifted through long instrumental passages, pastoral suites, experiments that did not always land. A band feeling in the dark for what it might become. Listen to the sprawling, uneven records of that searching phase, and you hear four people proposing, contradicting, abandoning, trying again. No one was holding the whole vision because no one yet knew what the vision was. It was inefficient, and it was alive. And out of that inefficiency, the band slowly discovered the thing that would make it immortal. A way of building space and atmosphere that belonged to no one of them alone. Begin now with the bassist and take his position seriously instead of caricaturing it. By the middle of the 1970s, he had become the conceptual engine of the band. The themes, the words, the architecture of meaning that turned a collection of songs into a single statement about madness, about time, about absence, about the machinery of power. These were increasingly his. And he arrived at a conviction that is not tyranny, but a genuine theory of art. The conviction that great work comes from a single unified vision, that a masterpiece is not a committee, that someone has to hold the whole thing in one mind or it dissolves into pleasant noise. Look at the art he admired, the literary work, the singular authorial voice, the long-form statement that bears the fingerprint of one consciousness from first line to last. He wanted rock to be that. He wanted the album to stop being a bag of songs and become a book with one author. By his theory, a band that refuses a leader is not free. It is merely undecided, and undecided art, to him, was the worst fate of all, the fate of those early searching records that never quite cohered. He was not wrong. Some of the most complete artistic statements ever made came from exactly this principle, the refusal to dilute a vision by consensus. When he took the wheel, the band produced its most thematically unified, most savage, most coherent work. Consider the record built entirely around a single accusation against the music industry and human coldness, where every track serves one argument, where even the structure, beginning and ending on the same fading sound, encloses the listener in one unbroken thought. Consider the wall built brick by brick, a concept so total that it became a story, a film, a stage spectacle, every piece subordinated to one man's narrative of isolation. This was the fruit of his theory in action, a single author holding everything. He could point to those records and say, "This is what my idea produces," and the records would agree with him. Nobody builds a cathedral by committee, he was saying, and for a while the cathedrals proved him right. Now turn to the guitarist and take his position just as seriously, because it is not the small idea we are taught it is. He looked at the same band and saw something the author could not see from inside his own vision. He saw that the magic of this particular group had never come from one mind. It had come from friction, from the collision of people who heard the world differently, Think about how their most famous sound is actually built. A guitar phrase that refuses to hurry, that leaves long silences between notes so each one can bend and decay into meaning. Underneath it, a bed of keyboard harmony that does not assert itself, that simply makes a warm room for the guitar to ache inside. Behind both, a drummer who declines every opportunity to show off, who keeps a floor so steady you forget it is there. None of these three elements is virtuosic alone. The miracle is the balance between them, the way restraint in three directions produces something none of them could produce by force. The guitarist understood that this was not authored. It was grown in the space between four people, and it would die the instant one person claimed to own it. He was not wrong either, because listen to what happened to the music as the single vision tightened its grip. The thing that made them unmistakable, that suspended warmth, that sense of four forces in delicate equilibrium, began to thin. By the time of the final record of the classic era, the keyboard warmth had been pushed almost entirely out. The harmony stripped down, the sound dominated by one voice and one set of preoccupations. It is a powerful record and a cold one, more a solo project in all but name than a band breathing together. The work had become more coherent and less alive at the same time, more clearly authored and less able to breathe. The guitarist was watching, in real time, the exact death he had predicted. The masterpiece growing colder as it grew more unified, the soul leaking out precisely as the control increased. He could point to that late record and say, "This is what happens when one man wins," and it would agree with him too. You can hear the whole tragedy if you simply trace the arc. The fertile searching phase, alive and unfocused. Then the golden period, where for a brief window, the conceptual ambition of the bassist and the atmospheric balance of the others pulled in the same direction at once. The only time all the forces coincided and produced the records the world will never stop listening to. Then the long decline, where the ambition kept growing while the balance kept dying. Each album more the work of one man and less the sound of four. The graph of their greatness is the graph of attention held and then lost. The summit is not where one man triumphed. The summit is where the war was briefly, miraculously, a draw. So hold both truths in your hands at once, because this is the whole tragedy. The author was right that great art needs a unifying vision. And he had it. And he produced unified greatness. The guitarist was right that this band's specific genius lived in the balance of forces, and he watched that genius die as the balance collapsed. These are not a correct opinion and a wrong one. They are two correct ideas about art that cannot both be obeyed inside the same band. You cannot have a single sovereign vision and a living equilibrium of equals at the same time. You must choose, and either choice kills something real. Choose the single vision and you lose the breath. Choose the equilibrium and you lose the unifying force that turns songs into statements. This is why the conflict was not a malfunction of Pink Floyd. The conflict was Pink Floyd. The tension between the man who wanted to author and the men who wanted to balance was not interfering with the music. It was generating it. For a few extraordinary years that tension held, neither side able to fully win, and the irresolution itself was the engine. The records of that golden period are the sound of an argument that has not yet been settled. Ambition and atmosphere pulling against each other with exactly equal force. And the refusal to settle it is precisely what made them breathe. The moment the argument was won, by anyone, the engine would stop. And it did. So we have to retire the question we keep asking, which of them was right? Because the answer is both. And that answer is the point. The bassist was not a tyrant betraying a democracy. He was an artist with a true theory of art, applying it with terrifying consistency. The guitarist was not a coaster defending his paycheck. He was an artist with an equally true and opposite theory, defending the one thing he knew could not survive, a single owner. They were two serious people who understood art deeply and incompatibly, chained together inside a band that could only survive while neither of them prevailed. Each was the necessary enemy of the other. Each was protecting something real from the other's truth. And here's the autopsy. When you mourn the end of Pink Floyd, you are not mourning a victory of good over evil or evil over good. You are mourning the moment a productive tension between two correct ideas was finally resolved. And resolution, here, was death. The band needed the war. It needed the bassist pushing toward a single vision and the guitarist pulling back toward the balance. And it needed neither to win. The early phase shows what they were without the tension fully formed, promising and unfocused. The late phase shows what they were once the tension was resolved in one man's favor. Coherent and cold. Only in the middle, in the held draw, did the miracle live. Peace, in this band, was not the goal. Peace was the corpse. So I leave you with a question that should change how you hear every record they made after the balance broke. If both men were right, and if the band could only live while their two truths fought to a standstill, then the thing that killed Pink Floyd was not the bassist. And it was not the guitarist. It was the end of the argument itself. The day one truth finally silenced the other. So when one of them finally won, tell me, what exactly had they won? Except the right to stand alone in a room where the music had already stopped breathing. There is one more thing to say, and it concerns the man both of them, in their war, tended to forget. Through the whole golden period, there was a fourth force quietly making the balance possible. The keyboard player, whose harmonic instinct was the soft tissue connecting everything. He almost never raised his voice. He wrote few of the words and gave few of the interviews. And precisely because he fought for nothing, he was the first casualty when the author decided the band needed only one will. Listen to the records made before and after he was pushed aside, and you will hear the temperature drop. The warmth that made the dread bearable, the human glow under the cold concepts, was largely his. And it left when he did. He is the proof that the guitarist was right. Because his removal is the exact point where the balance became impossible and the single vision became total. The bassist won his argument by removing the very element that had been quietly winning the guitarists. Where art does not console, it autopsies.